The potential for stablecoin adoption isn't significant in the short term, according to the Bank of America. However, it could enhance payment efficiency and customer experience. Increasingly, experts in Western foreign policy are viewing Russia as a tempestuous storm and China as slow but significant climate change, posing a higher threat to the democratic world. Therefore, it appears reasonable for the US and its allies to mitigate their economic risks related to China. This involves avoiding dependencies and decreasing vulnerabilities. However, the recent surge in anti-Beijing sentiment in Washington, from both political wings, goes beyond what's necessary. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan proposes a measure of prudent de-risking that stays within reasonable and targeted limits. For instance, President Joe Biden's decision last week to ban American investments in Chinese firms involved in semiconductors, quantum computing, or artificial intelligence was an appropriate move. These areas are technology hotspots that will play key roles in military supremacy and potential future conflicts. These may include a clash between the US and China over places like Taiwan or the South China Sea. As the election season approaches, hysteria mounts, with politicians escalating their rhetoric against China. Even President Biden, after announcing new economic restrictions on China, characterized its communist leaders as problematic and its economy as unstable at a recent fundraiser. This amplifying anti-China sentiment is pushing the idea of economic decoupling. During the era of Cold War, such an economic separation didn't have much impact in the West as the US and Soviet economies had minimal overlap, mostly because the communist bloc kept itself isolated from global trade and finance. However, the current scenario is starkly different. China and the West are integrally interwoven into the global economic fabric, and any abrupt disconnection could adversely affect millions of individuals. Even American consumers and workers would face significant setbacks. A few dissenting voices in Congress like Jim Himes, a representative from Connecticut and the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, are preaching a different approach. Being well aware of China's aggressive cyber policies, Himes advocates confrontation where necessary, but also emphasizes that the U.S. should not seek to undo China's economic advancements. He argues that it would be counterproductive for the U.S. to attempt to force China's population of 1.4 billion into poverty. The U.S. needs Chinese consumers to continue buying American products. Trying to impede China's development would not inspire Beijing to tone down its assertive, wolf warrior, diplomacy. Instead, it could strengthen the nationalistic belief that the West is out to humiliate and undermine China. The ongoing power struggle between the US and China is significantly influenced by their respective economic clout. Over the previous decade, China's president, Xi Jinping, has heightened his global aspirations, relying on strong economic growth and ample funds to back projects like his Belt and Road Initiative. This grand plan aims to unite Asia, Africa, and Europe through Chinese rails, roads, bridges, and ports. However, there may be a roadblock in Xi's plans. Recently, China experienced deflation, and growth projections for next year have dropped under 5%. While this may seem decent when compared to developed nations, the secured global dominance Xi dreams about requires a bigger budget. The intriguing part is that the main antagonist to China's economy doesn't seem to be America. Instead, some, including Adam Posen, president of the Peterson Institute for International Economics in Washington, believe the culprit is Xi Jinping himself. The argument revolves around Xi's unpredictable and occasionally harsh policies in recent years, which have spooked Chinese consumers into stashing money in bank accounts rather than investing or spending it. This behavior, in turn, could slow productivity and growth more than what Western analysts anticipate. Xi's unpredictable tactics commenced with a crackdown on tech moguls, such as Jack Ma, who dared to criticize the government. His zero-COVID policy was both sporadic and harsh, resulting in sudden complete city lockdowns that effectively isolated their inhabitants. Even the city reopenings this year seemed random. The prevailing sentiment, Posen contends, is one of deep-seated fear. A fear of unexpected and uncontrollable property or job loss reminiscent of the days under Mao. The theory being presented here is that China's difficulties may not necessarily be the result of U.S. economic sanctions or trade wars, they might be self-inflicted. Observers note, it's often best to avoid meddling when an adversary is making mistakes. There might be no need for the U.S. to impose further restrictions on China's economy. On the contrary, supporting China's economy might be a beneficial strategy for America, as it can foster prosperity at home and generate a positive environment that could soften diplomatic relations. Clearly, there are numerous issues the U.S. and China need to discuss. Xi Jinping's strategic blunders are negatively impacting China's stature on the world stage. By aligning with Russia's President Vladimir Putin, who is increasingly alone and losing geopolitical influence, Xi has made a questionable move. He has further complicated matters by antagonizing smaller nations from Europe to Southeast Asia. Moreover, by meddling with China's own economy, he has seemingly dropped the ball again. Xi may eventually realize that a collaborative approach could be more effective. If this happens, it's in the U.S.'s best interest to have a humbled, not embarrassed, Xi Jinping at the negotiation table. Thus, toning down the rhetoric out of Washington may be in everyone's best interest.